Right, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. It has turned 6 o'clock, so we will make a start on tonight's meeting. I'd like to welcome you all to this evening's meeting of the Cabinet. As I can see, we have a number of members of the public in the room. I will read out the evacuation procedure. A fire drill is not expected, so if the alarm sounds, please evacuate the building quickly and calmly. Please use the stairs and do not use the lifts. Once out of the building, please gather outside Lloyd's Bank on the opposite side of the road. Exit by the door by which you entered the room or by the fire exits, which are clearly indicated by the standard green fire exit signs. If you need any assistance in evacuating the building, please make yourself known to a member of staff. Please also make sure all your mobile phones are turned off or set to silent. I would also advise that all or part of the meeting will be recorded for future broadcast, and it is being broadcast live tonight as well on our YouTube channel. That leads us on to agenda item number 2, which is apologies. I'm only aware of one apology, which is from Councillor Golby. Agenda item 3 is declarations of interest. Are there any declarations from members of the Cabinet which are not already printed on the agenda? No, in which case we'll take them as read. Thank you. That leads us on to agenda item number 4, which is the minutes of the last meeting. Is everyone happy that I sign them as a true and accurate record of the last meeting? Okay, thank you. That leads us on to agenda item 5, which is public consultation. I am aware of a number of members of the public who wish to speak, so in light of that, I will be moving some of the items on the agenda. So agenda item 14, which is the Q1 General Fund outturn report, will come first, and then I'll move on to agenda item 17, which is the Civic Hall. After that, we will then resume the normal order as in the agenda, as I'm assuming most people are here about the Bedworth Civic Hall, so it makes sense for me to take that one at an early opportunity. So that leads us on to agenda item number 14, which is Councillor Croft.
Thank you very much, Leader. I shall move the agenda item under my name. This is the General Fund Budget Outturn Report up to the end of August this year. We're now in a position to start sharing in-year financial data, and I apologise to the Cabinet for the delays in that. We've got a lot of items tonight, so I should try and keep my remarks brief, but the real headline figure to highlight to Cabinet and to the Borough is that we are showing an in-year deficit of just over £1 million in the budget. That is reflective of the very difficult economic times that the country now faces, with very high inflation and very weak economic growth. There are several reasons for that. People are very well aware of the war, the pandemic, the international situation with supply chains, but that is the situation that we now face. So just to break down some of the cost pressures facing the council, we have a £600,000 pay award additional to what we had budgeted in February. Now, that's understandable, given that inflation is so high, people will want higher pay claims. That was not foreseen at the start of the year. If we had that kind of market insight, we would all be considerably richer than we are now, but it is something that we have to face, and it's something we have to include in our actuals rather than our forecasts. There's also, Leader, the car parking income has not hit the target. Again, a reflection of the economic slowdown as we come out of COVID and as we hit the general economic situation in the country. Benefit subsidy, we cannot claim for certain homelessness costs. Again, people are facing tougher times, and inflation is considerably higher than projected for our building materials and for our general overheads. Energy, for example, is affected by that. We've had higher audit costs, we've got higher staffing costs than projected on the general fund versus the HRA, and we've had an inflationary rise in our parks contract, which is built into the contract itself. Now, some of this is offset by increased recycling income, but the overall position is that we are, like I say, 1.07 million away from target. Given that the council is required to balance its books by law, we are now going to have to face rectifying that situation, and in November we will be bringing forward our medium-term financial plan and beginning our budgetary process and keep Cabinet informed of that. But this has to inform everything, every decision that we make between now and the end of the financial year, and given that our medium-term financial plan that we published in February already projected well over £1 million worth of savings that had to be found for 23-24, this will not improve the situation. So sorry to be so gloomy, Leader, but I will move the report.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Croft. Does that receive a seconder? Councillor Gutteridge, thank you. I have one speaker on this item, which is Mrs. Condacor.
Thank you. I'll just comment. I mean, I've made my comments in order, and obviously we're not taking the things in order. I think it's quite disappointing that this was only put on 2 days ago. It doesn't give people an awful lot of time to plough through it. I'll only pick out one thing which absolutely leapt out at me: car parking income. I just can't believe that you haven't foreseen the reduction. Maybe not to the extent, but you've closed the main car park, Abbey Street, and you're wondering why car parking income has gone down. The signs to any other car park are absolute rubbish. Friend came over from elsewhere. We were meeting her in Nuneaton. Things. She had to phone me. She said, I'm in some car park. I don't know where I am. And things. I had to go and walk round and find her because she just didn't know where she was relative to anything else in town. Unless she's coming to see us, she won't be coming into Nuneaton again. And £469,000, that's almost half the million that you're talking about and things. There just seems to have been a distinct lack of planning regarding this. You know, you need to be encouraging people. I know we're in a cost of living crisis, fewer people are out spending money, and that all does have an effect and things, but you really shouldn't be having such an enormous variance, in my opinion. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Condacor. Any member of the Cabinet wish to raise a point of clarification of what she's said? It's on what Mrs. Condacor has said, is it, Councillor Gutteridge? Okay.
Thank you. Mrs. Condacor, which car park did your friend park in? Because I'd like to know, because obviously we need to look at the signage if it's a Nuneaton and Bedworth Borough Council car park.
Well, she ended up in the Victoria Street car park, but she was, I don't know what she'd put in her Google map, but she then didn't really know where, there was no signage as to how to get into the town centre where she was meeting us.
Okay, thank you, Mrs. Condacor. That moves us on to any non-Cabinet member. Any non-Cabinet member wish to speak? Councillor Condacor.
Thank you very much, Chair. My name's Councillor Keith Condarker for the audience. They haven't given me a sign. I'm the leader of the Green Group. Really disappointed that we've had this financial information so late. We obviously now are going to be in a panic mode, being careful about spending with this £1 million black hole. But we're actually so far in the year. Yeah, the scrutiny committees have had no financial information, and it seems the Cabinet have had no financial information, and it's now October. I totally agree with what my wife said, that the car parking stuff was very foreseeable. If you start taking out car parks, and also you start moving tenants out of various retail things for regeneration, you are going to shrink the size of the footfall in the town centre. We are shooting ourselves in both feet the way the regeneration is damaging footfall. We understand you need to do regeneration, but the lack of phasing to actually try and keep as much of the town alive as possible really isn't helping us. And there's other things on here which we really should have been getting ahead of. We talk about the homeless costs. We have bought last year 196 to 198 Church Road in Stocking Forward. We still don't seem to have started refurbishing that so it can be brought into use. That is actually a very good idea. Where the council is going seriously wrong is doing it so slowly. Yeah, we've invested money in it and we haven't yet, and maybe even a year off, get people in that accommodation. And there's been a total lack of scrutiny. We could go down this, and this report should go to scrutiny committees, because there's loads of lines on here that need picking up and questions asked. And the way this has only gone to Cabinet as a late item has been appalling. And I think the Cabinet member might be useful to actually come to scrutiny committees and maybe give us more detailed question and answer on some of these lines, because some of it is not really obvious. I sent the director some questions today because various things in there I didn't understand. I'll leave it at that. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Condacor. As Councillor Condacor is aware, as he has raised this issue previously, and I have told him a number of times, both here and in full council, we do have a recruitment and retention problem in this council, of which finance department is a considerable cause for concern. And I share his concern about the timeliness of reports, but it has been unavoidable given the issues that the finance team have been facing. Up until recently, we did not have a full-time Section 151 officer. Ms Summerfield has taken that job on, and I have to say she has done a remarkable job in terms of turning around a department which had significant issues. As Councillor Condacor also knows, we have had to face auditing, is it the 1920 and 2021 accounts, which we have to do by law and have been proven challenging given the absence of key members who have since left, members of staff that is, who have left this authority. I agree it isn't a perfect situation, but I can assure Councillor Condacor and all members of the public that with our new Section 151 officer, she is moving literally heaven and earth to try and rectify some of the inherent problems in that department that we inherited 18 months ago. We now have an acting head of finance. I would, of course, love to have a full-time permanent member head of finance, but that is the situation that we are in. And I believe we have not long recently recruited a finance business partner on an interim basis as well. Again, I wish that we would have staff on a permanent basis, but at the moment, it seems to be a applicant's market in terms of where they go. In terms of the regeneration on Abbey Street, it has been very carefully phased. Whatever timings we picked would not have been perfect. And I know that many members of the public have been saying we should have been able to keep half of the car park open. That simply wasn't feasible from a health and safety point of view, because the amount of equipment that they need on that site means that they need to use the full extent of the land there. And indeed, I was there last Friday, and they are doing exploratory works there as part of preparations for phase 2 to see what the land situation is underneath the other side of the car park closest to Queen's Road. And indeed, when I was over there, they mentioned that they have found some old chimneys from the old gasworks, and that some of the gas which has been released from there has been very interesting, to say the least. Part of the problem is in this borough as a whole, both in Nuneaton and in Bedworth, we don't fully know everything which is underneath the soil of all these regeneration sites that we are looking at. And that does prove challenging. And if people do look at the video which I did last Friday that is online, they will see that there are significant areas of the car park there which are being used. Indeed, I think I counted about 8 test holes over that side of the car park to look at what is under there, pending a archaeological survey. Now, we could have waited till we started phase 2 completely, but we have phased it as part of phase 1 so that we can reduce the disruption as much as possible. So I would refute Councillor Condacor's arguments there. I appreciate it is difficult and challenging, but whatever we do would not have been perfect. Nothing ever will be. Any members of Cabinet wish to come back on the... Oh, did you indicate, Councillor Harbison? Yes. Councillor Harbison, I'll let you come in.
There are obvious difficulties with all this. I would just ask Councillor Condacor to come back with his specific suggestions on what we can do to change this. Thank you.
I'm afraid that non-cabinet members can't question each other, although I think I take the point that it's easy to criticise but very much harder to actually come up with a solution.
well, bearing in mind he's a councillor, so can he come back to us with some long-term solutions bearing this? Because otherwise it's just shouting against us. Thank you.
I think we can wait and see what happens at the next full council to see whether any solutions are brought forward from other quarters. Anyone else from Cabinet? No? In which case, all those in favour of the recommendations, please show. Okay, that is carried. Thank you very much. That leads us on to agenda item number 17, which I brought forward, which is any other items, and the Civic Hall is the other item which is coming tonight. Councillor Markham.
Thank you, Chair. This is a difficult and emotive report to bring before Cabinet today. It recommends consideration that the Civic Hall facility is not reopened at this time. This is down to the Council's resources and the financial strain it will place upon the authority to bring it back into operation. The data and finances used in the report are from the year 2019-2020, as this is the last time it was in operation prior to COVID. In this year, the budget for the Civic Hall was £692,440 and had an overspend of £69,602, taking the actual spend to £762.42, which was reported in the July 2020 Cabinet report as part of the end-of-year accounts. In addition to these reported costs, charges as part of the year-end, close down and pension cost, earmarked reserves and direct recharges of £78,182 made the final cost to the Council of £840,223, as per figure 1 in section 5.1 of the report. This means, after ticket sales and bar income, the Council subsidised the Civic Hall by £8,422 to open that year. There were actually 29,439 people who attended shows. For each person that attended a show, it has cost the Council and the residents £28.54. Within the report is also a costing per attendee after internal and capital charges have been removed, and this is reported as an £11.84 subsidy per head, but the reality is the subsidy is over £840,000. Whilst the premises has been used by the Coventry and Warwickshire Partnership Trust as a vaccination centre, we have taken this time to evaluate the long-term plans for the Civic Hall and the wider Bedworth Town Centre. In the 2019-20 year, there were 107 performances, 2 shows sold over 700 tickets, and 51 sold less than 300. In its current format, it has been described as too small to be a large theatre and too big to be a small theatre. I have figures that are in the public domain going back to 2010-11, in which the actual spend by the Council to keep the Civic Hall open has been an average of £761,026 each year over the 10 years prior to COVID. These losses were all during the Labour-controlled administration, where no refurbishments was carried out either, and this was what we inherited from the Labour Party. This money could have been spent on other services. The estimated costs to reopen the venue and undertake works due to very old and obsolete equipment is as follows: fire risk assessment, ACM removal, stage and floor repairs, general maintenance is approximately £100,000 prior to opening the venue. Replacement of boiler house, as equipment is very old and obsolete. Install 3 new boilers. Control panel and building energy management system is estimated at between £700,000 and £750,000. In addition, replacement of radiators, pipework and control valves to provide energy efficiency is £200,000. So we are looking at least £1 million to bring the building to a usable state, and this is without any running costs. The venue also requires investment in the changing, dressing and meeting rooms, along with building redecoration and marketing branding. And due to COVID and the Civic Hall being used as a vaccination centre, it has no short or medium-term hires or bookings or performances planned and will require 12 to 18 months to get a full programme of entertainment. It has been difficult to bring this report to Cabinet today. As a Bedworth resident myself and a councillor, I know the Civic Hall has been part of the Borough and Bedworth community for many years. There are many memories associated with it. I have used it myself. But I'm afraid in the current financial climate it is not sustainable without many other services being cut, which will affect all the residents of the borough. What we don't want to see is cuts in other departments to shore up something that has been losing thousands of pounds over many years. So I ask that this recommendation at 1 and 2 be considered by Cabinet tonight, please.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Markham, and I will second the report and I will speak later. I am aware that we have, I think it's 9 speakers on the list, so I'll take them in the order that I have them. For those of you who are in the audience, hopefully you have a set like this in front of you. When you come to speak, there is a big rectangular button in front of you. It should hopefully turn red above there and have a red circle around here. Once you have finished, can I ask you to turn it off because it will stop other members being able to hear you, and also those who are live streaming won't be able to hear you as well. So I'll take Mrs. Condacor first on the list.
Thank you. I won't speak too long because I'm sure a lot of other people know even more than I do about it and things. But I think the shock really is that it's just been sprung upon everybody without any consultation. There's been nothing saying, oh, what are the alternatives? How can we work around this? Can it be run by a trust? And all things like that. You've known from the, well, before you took power, that what the situation was. And it just seems that it's just been pushed aside. Oh, we're using it as a vaccination centre and things. From the figures, I would just guess that the Partnership Trust have not actually been charged adequate amounts for wear and tear that entails having a longer, hire of places. And I'm very concerned with some of the things in the report about what the consequences now in terms of like the Arts Centre, how much redundancy pay would be required for those who will lose their jobs. And, it's all this marketing needed to be improved no end. We all know that there were problems with the Civic Hall, but I don't believe there are things that couldn't be rectified because the borough, for the large part, is totally behind it, and certainly the people in Bedworth. On the thing, there was limiting, on your report, 4.5, limited market appeal from the cafe. The only problem I ever know people mentioning was that it wasn't open enough. It's not that people didn't want to use it. They did. It was the opening hours. And there are lots of things like that which I'm sure could be sorted and actually make it profitable and make it work. I'm sure others will have loads of ideas and things. But it's really the lack of consultation and actually the lying that's gone on. Oh, no, we're not going to close it and things. And then all of a sudden, boom, we're closing it and without discussion.
Thank you, Mrs. Condacor. Any member wish to ask a question? Can I ask a question, Mrs. Condacor? You've heard the financial situation tonight. What services would you have us cut to balance the books?
I don't know. I would have to look with others who know far more about finances than I do, actually what the arrangements are for the Civic Hall and what the other options would be for having someone from outside actually take it on and things. I saw in Midlands today, only the other day, about the Wolverhampton Civic Hall. I know that is a much, much larger venue, but it can be done. And it would have to be done with volunteers, with a charity, trustees or whatever things. But I believe there is an alternative. I'm not in a position to know all the ins and outs of all the services and what have you, but I believe it's been done in a rush without looking at the longer term things.
So the answer is you haven't got a clue about which services to protect, so you would be happy for us to cut other services to keep the Civic Hall open.
You're putting words in my mouth. I would have to see all the things. I can't just sit here and suddenly say, oh yes, we can fund the Civic Hall by cutting this, this and this. I'd have to see absolutely everything there, things. And as a member of the public and someone who isn't an accountant, I cannot sit here and give you an instant answer.
Okay, thank you, Mrs. Condacore. We next move on to Sam Margrave.
Mr. Chairman, I'm here to speak against this recommendation and hand you a petition on behalf of more than 850 people. We ask that you defer this decision, debate our petition at Council next week, hold a public meeting to consult and listen to local people, and restore trust in politicians by reopening the Civic Hall. I've also provided anonymised comments by petitioners. This Cabinet report has no analysis of the business case for reopening versus closure, the impact on the town, cost of decommissioning, impact of inflation, house prices or land values, or enough detail to make a responsible decision today. What we do know is that the Civic Hall has not been well maintained and left to rack and ruin despite income from the NHS, paying for an allegedly unsafe venue. We are told that money is a problem, but council has recently borrowed nearly £20 million for a hotel in Nuneaton. Is Bedworth less important? If the council is that hard up, have you considered scrapping councillors' allowances and expenses, saving the taxpayer £500,000? You had the COVID recovery grant, new homes bonus and 106 monies. Where is it all gone? The museum makes a loss. Are you going to close that too? Councillor Wilson, on the radio recently, you said the Civic Hall costs £25 for every person who walks through the doors. The report says it's £11.84, and Councillor Markham says it's £28. What is it? When asked if something has changed between now and the elections when you promised not to close the venue, you said absolutely not. How can we believe anything we're told? Was there ever a plan to reopen the Civic Hall, or was that fake news? This report makes no promises of a new venue. There are no firm plans for the future. Councillor Wilson says he wants to replace the Civic Hall with something better, yet the new venue proposed is a reduction in capacity by 55%, meaning there won't be a large venue for our borough. There won't be a large venue for conferences or big acts to come to. Jimmy Carr isn't going to come to a 350-seat venue. Is that really better for Bedworth or the borough? With new management, investment and working with the private sector, the Civic Hall can be profitable and protected for future generations. We do want a bolder vision for Bedworth. We do want regeneration. To level up, not knock down the Bedworth Civic Hall. Don't make the same mistakes of the previous administration. Please listen to local people as they know best. And finally, can I just say it's disgraceful the Leader of the Opposition isn't here. Mr. Nuneaton, as he calls himself, clearly doesn't care about Bedworth. Thank you.
Any Cabinet member wish to raise a point of clarification? Mr. Margrave, are you aware that we are currently investing in a new leisure centre at the cost of £34 million to this authority? Are you also aware that we brought in the Sanctuary event, which meant that people as far away as New York actually got to know about Bedworth? Is he aware that we put the market back out into the streets of Bedworth Town Centre, which is what residents have called for a long period of time? Is he aware that we have also delivered on a new tennis court, a new BMX track, which Nuneaton doesn't have, by the way? I would call that levelling up, so why does he call that levelling down?
Thank you, Councillor Wilson. It's very interesting. I thought it was just one question, but I'll try and answer. First of all, in relation to the Sanctuary project, this council, along with Warwickshire County Council, spent £100,000 on a wooden structure that they then set light to. What a waste of money. You say you've got no money, and you set fire to money in Bedworth Park. There was nothing the day after. The COVID recovery grant has not gone to local businesses or community organisations. I don't know what you've done with the COVID recovery grant, but the government were good enough to give you money that you don't seem to have invested in the local community. I can't remember all the other questions because there were so many. What I would like to ask you, though, is, Did you make, and even informally as a Conservative group, did you know you were going to close the Civic Hall before the elections? Did you lie to local voters?
No, we didn't, because we didn't have the decision from Coventry and Warwickshire Partnership Trust. Councillor Margrave, you've had your say.
You're a liar.
Sorry, Mr Margrave, former Councillor Margrave. We have not made a decision until we recently had the letter from Coventry and Warwickshire Partnership Trust saying they no longer wanted to use the Civic Hall, even though we gave them a year's licence if they wanted to use it, because my view was that the Civic Hall, saving lives, delivering jabs, was more important. And I still believe in that. And having been there yesterday to go get my booster jab, I still believe that. Now, former Councillor Margrave, you should know better about some of these issues. So what did you do when you were a Labour councillor to actually challenge the financial ruin that they were doing about the Civic Hall? Because if these decisions had been made earlier and harder decisions had been made, we wouldn't be in this mess. And you were quite happy to collect your councillor's allowance when you were a councillor.
Councillor Wilson, first of all, I have evidence that the Conservative group decided long before the election to close the Civic Hall. They did speak about replacing it. They did speak about... I'm sorry, Councillor, can you...
Order.
I have evidence, and I'm happy to present the evidence.
Councillor Harbison.
Councillor, I'm happy to make the evidence available that the Conservative group said that they were going to go to local residents and they were going to say that they were going to create a new entertainment venue, but they were getting rid of the Civic Hall. So you did... I genuinely believed in you as new councillors that you were going to do something different. You weren't going to be like the old, more of the same. Now, in relation to what I did as a Labour councillor, Dennis Harvey used to tell me that he didn't need an opposition when he had me as a councillor. I argued for years that the Civic Hall needed some privatisation in the bar, that it needed more investment, that we needed to go big on Bedworth and we needed to build a better borough that could deliver for everybody. I believe in regeneration. I believe in change. What I don't believe in is lying to residents, not consulting them, rushing decisions when you need to take time to make them. And what I don't believe in, importantly, is leaving Bedworth to experience the situation where the reality is that Bedworth as a town centre, losing the Civic Hall, is being written off. What you're doing is saying, Nuneaton, we care about Nuneaton and I care about Nuneaton. But you're saying that Bedworth doesn't matter. And what you're doing is you're doing regeneration in Nuneaton whilst relegating Bedworth.
Councillor Margrave. Sorry, Mr Margrave, force of habit, although I think he still thinks he's a councillor. Yes, we did look at whether we could regenerate the Civic Hall before the election. That is different to closing it altogether as we are having to look at the moment. It was perfectly feasible to look at a wider regeneration plan for Bedworth, whilst, if it was financially viable, keeping the existing centre open until the absolute last minute when we could do regeneration. The two ideas are not incompatible. In fact, it is this administration which has brought forward a regeneration plan which would, if we can get the private investors involved, see the biggest regeneration programme that Bedworth will have ever seen. That was not done under the previous Labour administration. We have actually done that. We have moved heaven and earth to get that done, actually, as some of the officers would attest to if they were here, because I've been on their backs every single month looking at what transforming Bedworth could look like, because residents of Bedworth were quite legitimate in saying, you have transforming Nuneaton, where's transforming Bedworth? Until I moved the motion in opposition, there was no transforming Bedworth because Labour were forced into it in a hung council. So yes, we did look at whether we could do regeneration on the Civic Hall. That isn't the same as closing it as we're having to do at the moment. The two could have run in tandem. But the finances at the moment show we can't. And if he thinks that he can fund it from elsewhere, then I think he is doing the residents a disservice because he is actually selling them a lie. And I noticed he didn't answer the question about his own expenses when he was a councillor. But we'll move on to Nicola Fox.
Thank you. I'm here to state the case for the Civic Hall in Bedworth. The Borough has been missing its largest entertainment venue for years now, impacting every generation of theatre goers, from preschoolers seeing their first pantomime to pensioners reliving their younger days, and that'll be the day. The Civic Hall catered for everyone. Fans of wrestling, ballet, the darts, snooker, comedy shows, concerts, pantomime, bodybuilding, musicals, and probably more that I've forgotten to mention could all find something at the Civic Hall. And there was potential in the calendar for even more shows. Without a theatre of this size, we lose access to all of that. However, this is not my only concern about the closure of Bedworth Civic Hall. What I want to talk about is community, specifically what our community loses by the closure of this venue, and I'll start with schools. Schools and youth organisations would hire the theatre to offer their students a taste of performance on a big stage. For some of them, the Civic Hall was the only stage all of their children could fit on. In order to hire out a theatre of this size, they must now travel outside of the borough. And I've spoken with a number of them, and all of them have expressed their sadness and anger at this decision. Pam Chater of Chater Dance Academy particularly asked that her dismay at this decision and its wider impact be voiced at this meeting. Amateur dramatics also plays a key part in local communities. These societies help people find friends, improve mental well-being, and expand on skills, both on stage and off, costumes, set building, etc. So let's take Sirens Theatre. They used to hire Civic Hall to put on musicals. And they said, and I quote, "There is no alternative venue large enough to accommodate the scale of production we put on. With the Civic Hall closed, they are effectively homeless, a community group no longer able to function because of this decision." The Rainbow Sunshine Company is an integrated performance group for adults with differing capabilities and disabilities. I spoke to their chairperson, Leslie Ryan, and she spoke of their anger and despair, talking of the profound effect this closure will have on their group. The list goes on. If I had more than 3 minutes, I would have brought a list with me of all the schools and community groups affected, but that, I fear, would have taken up all of the time that I have to speak. Next, I would say a word on the impact that the sustained and proposed permanent closure of this venue has had and will continue to have on the town itself. Many of the touring shows that used to come to the Civic Hall, the big-name comics such as Jimmy Carr, Alan Davis, Jim Davidson, Anne Murray, none of these are going to come to smaller venues. People will now have to travel to Birmingham and Coventry to see these shows. Instead of bringing people to Bedworth, we're now sending them away to spend their money outside the borough on ticket prices, food, drink, and more. We lose the big shows and the big names, and we lose the secondary spend. Spoons in Bedworth used to delight in telling the Civic Hall staff that when panto and large events like the Brass Band Weekend were on, they had to double their bar staff to keep up with demand. All that extra custom and money for local businesses is lost without a venue of this size. And finally, the council say it will cost £1 million to reopen the venue. I ask that on the itemised breakdown of these costs, they highlight which ones are legal requirements to reopen the venue in its current condition, which ones are outside the normal maintenance, and what the reasons for them are, and which ones are simply on their wish list of improving the venue, because we could make it the envy of all the venues around. One last sentence, please. For the benefit of the community of the whole, let's get the venue open first, then invest in it later and make it the success it should be. We don't need a new, smaller venue. We need this one. Thank you.
Next speaker is Matthew Ford.
Thank you. My name's Matt Ford. I've been a stakeholder in the Civic Hall for over 3 decades as an audience member, employee, entertainer and hirer. As an entertainer, I've sung in over half a dozen command performances for many of the borough's mayors, as well as a dozen consecutive years with my own big band, on average selling 650 seats each year, which shows what can be done with determination and effort. I understand that when accountants make decisions, they're purely concerned with the bottom line, and the Civic Hall is seen by some as a public service that doesn't return a profit. In my opinion, though, arts cannot and must not be viewed from a purely business perspective. The benefits to society as a whole must be taken into account. The fact that they are difficult to quantify makes them no less important. The benefits to mental health and well-being through involvement in the arts are proven without question. In this post-pandemic era, as society lurches from one crisis to another, there's never been a more important time for live music, song and dance. Positive engagement in the arts can and does reduce the pressure on already squeezed social services and the NHS by improving self-confidence, self-esteem and emotional release. It works, it's a fact. In the 1980s, I was lucky enough to receive a passport to leisure. This free or subsidised access to sport and leisure facilities set me on the path to a healthier, more active lifestyle with robust mental health and physical well-being. Imagine if you were brave enough and innovative enough to invest in a passport to arts, making the Civic Hall the hub for dance groups, musical theatre groups, schools' music hubs, and community projects, potentially building an audience for shows and events for the next 40 years, and ultimately reducing strains on mental health services in the borough. You wouldn't be squandering taxpayers' money, you'd be investing it wisely. Arts are an essential tool in promoting health and well-being in the residents of the borough, something that you yourselves have highlighted as a priority. Nuneaton and Bedworth Borough is already languishing in the bottom third of the National League table for participation in the arts. Removing or reducing provision isn't going to solve this. With a population nearing 130,000 and more new homes being built by their thousands, it can only be a lack of determination and ambition that has led to poor attendances at the hall. As a borough, we've already endured 2.5 years with no major arts venue. With the best will in the world, it could take another 5 before a replacement venue is built. You then run the risk of losing vast swathes of theatre-goers because of habitual changes brought about by lack of opportunity. I also implore you, if you're going to rebuild another venue, to consider the impact of building a venue too small to be financially viable for promoters to bring in shows. A 350-seat theatre will not attract shows with bigger names or shows with more than a handful of musicians. Ultimately, with the lack of variety this leads to, you'll be back to square one. As someone with over 2 decades of professional experience, I offer my assistance, if you'd like it. This is a generation-affecting decision. Please, please consider. Do not take it lightly.
Any Cabinet member wish to? Councillor Guttridge.
Thank you very much. You said you hired the Civic Hall. How many weeks a year did you hire the Civic Hall, please?
I hired it for one-nighters. One every year for 12 years or more.
Okay. Julie Gatherer. Thank you.
Hello, Julie Bird, as is now, former director of Bedworth Arts Centre. You'll have to forgive me because after hearing what I've heard tonight, I have slightly written what I was going to say. I was going to request detailed information on financials because I've put in my 3rd Freedom of Information request and still not received full report and accounts for Bedworth Civic Hall. So I was interested to hear you speak earlier about the recruitment issues in your finance team. Is that why your freedom of information is so poor? Secondly, I was very interested about what you said earlier about your regeneration projects in the area and that you don't know what is in the ground underneath these regeneration projects. So have you given any thought to what is under the ground at Bedworth Civic Hall and how that would impact on your budget for a rebuild? And then finally, correct me if I'm wrong, your financial year is the 1st of April to the 30th of March. Now, I work in business, and for us, we do our budgets before our financial year. So I was just interested on when you did your budgets for the 2022-23 financial year, because 15 days into your new financial year, you put a post on Bedworth Conservatives categorically stating that the shutting of Bedworth Civic Hall was fake news. I don't care about Labour, I don't care about Conservative, but you asked the Labour Minister for his retraction of that statement. Yet here we are 6 months later. Was it fake news? Because we're looking at shutdown now. Thank you.
Okay. Any Cabinet member? To answer some of the... I couldn't answer your questions until you'd finished. So, in response to the FOI issue, we are trying to comply with FOI requests within the statutory deadline. I don't know when yours were submitted. I don't have that information to hand, so I shouldn't, but I'll let you come in.
The first time I asked for a report and accounts for Bedworth Civic Hall and specifically expressed the years I wanted, I had an FOI back that told me that there was so many football pitches in Nuneaton and so many in Bedworth. Who have you got working in your finance team? YTS? Oh, sorry, they don't exist anymore. Separate subject.
I can only apologise if you've received the wrong response. I haven't seen that response, nor would it go through me or any of the Cabinet members. So if that is an issue, then I'm sure the Chief Executive has picked that up. In response to budgets, we set our budget in February, in advance of the financial year. We have to do it by mid-February in order to comply with statute and getting council tax legislation
so
dealt
before
with.
the Facebook post on the 15th of April, you'd set your budgets and were aware of the costings?
We were aware of the costings at that time. When we set the budget in February, we hadn't even had the Ukrainian war yet, or it was just brewing. So that has sent inflationary pressures up significantly, made increased demands on fuel bills all across the country in a wide range of areas, and particularly the Civic Hall, which is very heavy on heating and electricity and gas, etc. I'm sorry, you've had your... I've let you speak for your 3 minutes. Please let me answer. You shouldn't be coming back in at all under the rules. I'm trying to answer some of the points that you raised. So we didn't know at that point the significant financial inflationary pressures we were going to have. At that point, we also agreed that we would be looking at having the NHS use it for a full financial year. That is what they asked for and we gave. We had no belief that they would actually pull out of their contract as early as they have done. We didn't think they would do. That's why I granted. If they'd have asked for 3 months, I'd have granted it. They asked for 12 months. I felt that my duty as leader of the council was to the safety of the residents of Nuneaton and Bedworth, which is why I granted it, because I wanted to get as many jabs in the arm as possible. During that time, there were people, particularly on the opposition benches, who said that our decision to let the NHS keep using it was a prelude to closure. It wasn't. What we wanted to do was use that time to evaluate how we could try and keep the Civic Hall open with it, knowing its financial pressures. However, the financial pressures we are now facing, and as you've heard tonight, we have £1 million that we have to find just within this year, not even before, that's just to balance the books, before we even get to next year's budget. It is no longer financially sustainable in its current form. Believe me, I wish I was not in this position of having to make this decision. I have had death threats in the past 10 days. Now, whatever people's viewpoints are, and it is your right to disagree with me, but for someone to ask for me to be hung by the gallows in front of the town hall is not appropriate. So I've tried to answer some of your questions. Jeff Hunt.
Thank you very much, Chair. My Latin may not be as good as it used to be. Naticum fundent illegitimae, which means after the event, consultation is normally useless. I hope in the case of what we're discussing here, that isn't going to be the issue that we're faced with. Every action has a consequence. The consequences are far outreaching and great for people in action. People probably don't even know what people in action is in this chamber. I've employed 500 people over 27 years at this moment in time throughout the borough, looking after people who are vulnerable with learning disabilities, and we're now extending our wares to people with mental health, which is a major issue out there in society. Our office block is due for demolition. Our landlord stood in our reception 2 weeks ago asking us if we would take a 10-year lease on so we could reduce the cost on an annual basis of our situation. I have 35 to 40 people working daily in that office block, most of them buying 12-month car parking tickets for revenue for the organisations that are around, and for the very situation that we do need an office block. I have no alternatives. We can't find one anywhere in Bedworth. We don't want to move anywhere else. We have the cafe in the park. We have the garden centre in the park. And I don't see that we should be moved from that site. It is a serious situation. 15 to 20 people a day come into our day services, people with learning disabilities that have no other facilities. They had them ripped away by the county councils over the years, so there are no centres for them to go to. We have also the same number of carers because they have to be brought in by a carer every day. That's 5 days a week. We have businesses all over Warwickshire and we bleed into the Worcestershire area as well. The situation is dire, the future is even worse, and I don't know what alternatives you're going to be offering me, but I can tell you this won't be the end of the story. I didn't come to be a Luddite tonight, and I don't think anyone, Sam, I might apologise, you might have got close to smashing up the weaving looms, but you didn't make it fully. The issues are that we need that building. We need it where it is. We need it in Bedworth because that's the centre of our universe. We opened our first home in the Croft, which is down in Hinkley Road, Hinkley Old Road. We're renovating that anytime soon. We have properties all over Warwickshire, and we have to look after people 24/7. We start looking after their body fluids every day. Our people are angels like the NHS, the carers that we have. Sorry, I know 3 minutes are up. Not really enough time to talk about such an important issue.
Thank you, Mr Hunt. We are aware of the situation with people in action. In fact, that is a conversation that members of the Cabinet have been having. And when we looked at the visioning document for what the regeneration of Bedworth could look like, we knew that people in action would need a home. And that is part of the precondition of the visioning document that we had. As part of what we asked for in the visioning document, it's a separate issue to the Civic Hall, although it is slightly related because we're looking at the Civic Hall issue tonight. One of the things that I asked for, knowing that there is a crucial lack of office space in Bedworth Town Centre, is to look at creating office space for new startup units, etc., new incubation units for businesses. And the vision is that people in action would be rehomed into one of those spaces. That is something that we have already discussed with the management team as part of what we want to do. But I know, Mr Hunt, you are a former businessman. You've told me many times at the Bedworth Town Centre Partnership. So I ask you, as a businessman, if it cost you £28 for every person who walked into your shop, could you stay in business?
I would have consulted communities before this thing just hit the press like a bomb for everyone. Just Bedworth, not only Bedworth, but the surrounding areas. And I know Matt for many, many years. He's filled the Civic Hall and he's filled other venues. He's been on all those cruise ships and everything else. He's offered you some support here to look at getting his expertise into a situation where we might not have to close the Civic Hall. Can the rest of the regeneration go ahead? I don't know. But it is a situation that you've got to do your due diligence on. And you've got to certainly look at the facets. What is the expense? I guess you'll be looking to get some sort of entrepreneurial organisations to build parts of the plan that currently exist on what we've seen so far, because no one has consulted us. Our landlords obviously don't know about it because they were offering us a 10-year lease. Well, they did know about it and they're trying to con us. But they will lose the building anyway because it will be a compulsory purchase at the end of the day. So they'll miss out, and everybody in the town's going to miss out. The Civic Hall's a major feature, and it has and can be, again, the pinnacle of Warwickshire in terms of entertainment. Pavarotti, you know, gosh, Struth, he came from miles around because he was the greatest.
Mr Hunt, I appreciate the histrionics. Histrionics don't pay the bill. I asked you a specific question as a businessman. If you're in business, would you open your doors if it was to cost you £28 for every person that walked through your doors?
I don't think the £28 is significant. I really would like to dispute that. I'd like to see the accounts that say that's a factual situation. If it was that bad, you were continuing to run it for the period of time that you were still in control. So why did you carry it on to that point? Why didn't you do this as soon as you got in? That would have been a sensible way forward, and then consult the people
Mr.
of
Hunt,
the borough.
Mr. Hunt, I asked you a question and you've avoided.
Answer to it. I've gone without wages in my businesses for months. My £28 went out to people to make certain they got a service. That's all I'm saying.
If you can put your...
No, it's not on.
It is on.
Is it? Oh.
Yeah. I suspect many businessmen, a number of businessmen I have spoken to in the borough have said they could not and would not keep a business open if it was costing them £28 a day. Mr. Hunt, Mr. Hunt, you've had your say. I'm going to move on. Andy Pearce.
Hi, my name is Andy Pearce. Now, this isn't my world, all right? I'm in the communities. I'm out there in front of people. And the community needs the Civic Hall. It needs it opening as soon as it can. I've already heard countless times tonight the economy's suffering. Liz Truss is trying to save X amount of billions of pounds. Why is now the time to be spending £50 million? Surely, if you're saying, and it isn't the case that it takes £1 million to get the Civic back up and running, but even if it did, surely it'd be better to spend that £1 million getting the Civic back up and running than knocking it down and building something else that is not as good as what is there. You shouldn't be regenerating it. It should be reuse, recycle, use what we've got there. I'm totally against this decision. The building isn't just a theatre as well. You've got to think the building's it's a space for meetings. It's a meeting space for people. There are rehearsal spaces there for groups, amateur groups, musicians, bands. I know countless artists and performers that have come from the Civic Hall and tread the boards of those stages, and many more will come again. The arts is such a vital part to the community. Mental health, well-being. The people of Bedworth have been without the Civic Hall for 2.5 years now. If you're talking about doing this plan, they're going to be without arts for another 2.5, 3, 4 years. It needs to be reopened, and it needs to be done now.
Thank you, Mr. Pearce. Any Cabinet member wish to ask a point of clarification? No. Julie Bromwich.
Evening. Evening, I'm Julie. I'm a director of a theatre company in Bedworth and the principal of Julie Boys Dance Academy, and I've been in Bedworth for 35 years. Communication here, I feel, has let us down. We only found out through a press release. And I just wondered how the communication is with the public and the community for this to get through, is my first query. Like I say, I heard from a newspaper story only a couple of weeks ago, and I just wish that we had more time to collect together everybody that's in the industry that is very passionate about keeping the Civic Hall open. My personal attachment with the building has been decades, and my teaching is through generations of the community in Nuneaton and in Bedworth. So I'm now that old, I'm teaching grandchildren of people that I used to teach, and they're still coming through the door. From my personal experience at the theatre, it's always been full. So maybe it looks, you need to look at who is in there, or the outreach, like Matt said, he's offered his expertise. There's a whole group of us out there that would help. There's volunteers out there that would help. That's what we want to do. We want you to just give us some time and be together and help and get it open. I echo everything with all the well-being of everybody, whether it's their mindset through COVID. It's been awful, and people need that community space. They need that bit of happiness when they go to the theatre that takes them away from the real world. And I know there's lots of figures and facts and things, but there is ways around that. Maybe you could franchise some of the areas. There's lots of things to look at that can't be discussed in 3 minutes. But I just wish that we had time and pull all these people together that are experts within their field, whether that's a bar, a restaurant, a cafe, a theatre, and bring them all together in the community and rebuild. That's my main point. Thank you.
Thank you. Any Cabinet member have a point of clarification? No. And last one on my list is Jackie West.
Thank you. Yes, I'm here today and I'm representing the people of Bulkington, Bedworth, Nuneaton and surrounding areas who were very shocked to find out the decision to shut down the Civic Hall. And I've actually got a petition up, the same, and there's over 1,000 people have signed already and are still doing so. We don't want the Civic Hall to close. We want to regenerate it. We want to inject life into it. We want to bring back theatre, arts, and the fact that it was used for multi-purposes, but it wasn't used to its full potential. Where was the proper business people that should have been running it in the first place? Why wasn't places franchised out? Why is 15 million or whatever is going to be spent on regeneration? It will not cost that to keep Bedworth Civic Hall in its place. And another thing, it shouldn't have went on the television, because the people of Bedworth, long before my time in Bedworth, paid to keep that, to erect that. There was an architect, he's not alive anymore, somebody knew him, and the people of Bedworth helped to pay to put that Civic Hall up. And it's about time that people of Bedworth were heard. It's disgraceful. We're always the bottom of the list. It's as if we don't matter. And all right, you're saying about different plans, programs, and things that you're going to have in progress, but a lot of it didn't even materialize. I think, when listening to the people here, I agree wholeheartedly with every argument they put to you about it. And beyond that, I've heard low-ender stories. It's shameful. The disabled people have easy access into that Civic Hall. They can get in and out, they can use the toilets, they can use the cafe, people went there for meals. It's not really used to its full potential. And it's also the identity of Bedworth. It's its culture and its heritage, and you're getting rid of it. It's disgraceful. The schools are using it. Do you not care about the education of the people here? Do you not care about all these people you're inviting into these new homes that you're building? What do you think they want for their future? It's shameful. May shame be upon your faces. I'm disgusted with what I've heard here tonight. I'm twittering on about what it's costing each person to come through the door. Rubbish. If it was run right, it wouldn't cost £28 per person. The right people are not in the right job.
That's very good.
Thank you. Any points of clarification from the Cabinet? No? Okay, in which case, any non-Cabinet member? Was that your hand there, Councillor Harbison, or were you just moving your scarf? Okay. Councillor Condacor.
Thank you very much. The plans to replace the Civic Hall are total fantasy. The cost of taking out people in action, the library, the car park behind it are so astronomical, it must be a 40 or 50 million pound regeneration project. And no one is going to do that in Bedworth. What the people have seem to be asking for is, can we have the £1 million to refurbish it, some money to actually keep it going, and we should really be looking at giving effectively the venue to a trust or something for £1 for a year or whatever. Because it happened at the Nuneaton Arts Centre. It is run without any cost to the Borough Council because people run it. A venue twice as large, if you take out all the depreciation and all the accountancy rubbish, if you have a bar and catering that's run either by volunteers or by Wetherspoons or wherever, you can run things at a profit. The Civic Hall was a financial basket case. I've studied it in my 10 years as a councillor, and it was absolutely crazy how we could make a loss on a bar with Ken Dodd going on for umpteen hours. Yeah, the catering was absolutely lunacy. That it bought so much food, it was actually making a loss selling food to a captive audience. The thing was a basket case, but that doesn't mean it cannot work. And we've wasted 18 months while the Conservative group have discussed amongst themselves in secret whether they can save it or not. If 18 months ago we said, we don't think we can save it on our own, give us some help, all these people could have put in expertise. We could have 18 months ago asked for money when the magic money tree was available before the current financial crisis, and we could have got a little bit of money. You now say it's £34 million for your swimming pool in Bedworth. If instead you had a slightly less shiny swimming pool at £30 million, that £4 million could have done a lot for the Civic Hall. Set it off, and I understand the council cannot run a Civic Hall. It couldn't organise a piss up in a brewery, as they say. But other people can. And this is why the marvellous building, which needs TLC, could go on for another 20 or 30 years if it had a capital investment and it was allowed to live as a part of the community. There's so much space up there. Yeah, people could use the office space. The NHS could use part of it. It has been neglected for years, and it's absolutely vast. And as a green, it tears my heart out to demolish something so big and build something so naff in its place. So I think we should really look, we should apologise to the community for wasting 18 months when we could have been saving it or trying to save it. And we should look at giving it to the community for £1 if enough critical mass can be found to sort it out, and actually look at a few £1 million to tart it up and get all the equipment working. I suggested many years ago we put solar on the roof. We could easily generate £30,000 of electric in a year. The electric bill for Civic Hall is £27,000. We can make £30,000 for electric on that gorgeous roof. Yeah, we need people to think of ideas, salami slice the problem up into how we solve the electric, how we solve the heating, how we can make the bar profitable. But none of that is being done because the Conservative group said, we are not closing the Civic Hall. The grief I got in this council chamber when I was accused of scaremongering. We have it on video, time again. I'm scaremongering. I knew exactly what was happening. I got the freedom of information request from the health service. I knew the health service were asked to hire the thing for a year because it was budget time and you needed it for your budget. I know all this stuff, Councillor Wilson. Thank you.
Councillor Condacor, I've seen the same email that you have from the director. Nowhere in that email does it say the council want you to take it on for 1 year. What that email says is how long do you want it for. There's quite a difference. If they'd have asked for 3 months, I'd have granted it. If they'd have asked for 6 weeks, I'd have granted it. What we needed to know was how long they wanted it for so that we could do forward planning. So if anyone is misleading people here, it is you, Councillor Condacor. Any Cabinet member wish to raise a point of clarification to Councillor Condacor? Councillor Guttridge.
Thank you. Thank you. How are we going to save £1 million without cutting services? I do the parks and the open spaces. Do you want me to stop cutting the grass? Do you not want me to put bedding plants in the Miners' Welfare Park? Do you want not me to put hanging baskets? What do you want? You've been a councillor for 10 years, and to my knowledge, you've said tonight you are the Green leader, and you've never produced a budget on budget night. There is now 2 of you, so I ask, will you be supplying a budget on this budget night next year? Thank you.
Councillor Condacor.
Thank you very much. I would love to run the council and sort out all the financial problems. It is absolutely stupid that you've got in this situation. You've closed car parks. Your problem is created half by yourself. You've got £1 million shortage in your budget, half of it's from car parking, and you keep wrecking the local economy by closing the car parks. I don't think that's a sensible way of going. Part of how I would save money, though, is actually let communities do things themselves. Stop all this putting flags up and renaming roads. I'm not all for that stuff. And give the communities what they want. One thing I would do is I'd go to free weekly bin collections. I'm very open about that. It costs an absolute fortune to run trucks around, and I think that would save us about £1/3 to £500,000. And we really should have gone in with the Warwickshire to have a Warwickshire-wide waste partnership running our bins and our recycling, because we've got 5 different recycling systems in Warwickshire. There's lots of things I can save £1 million, and I'd very happily produce a budget. I have produced budgets in the past, and I provided budget amendments. And I'd love to run the Civic Hall. Maybe we could run a bar properly. Thank you.
Councillor Hammersley, I understand you wish to speak.
Yes, thank you. Members of the public, I was made a councillor by you just over 2 years ago. Now, because like you, I wanted to make my hometown better. I was not happy with what I'd seen and gone on in the past by the previous administration, just as you were not, and wanted to change for the better. I, like you, could see that good things had been done to the town, but in the last 10 or so years, I could also see it was in decline and disappearing into the abyss. I, like you, want to stop this now, before it has passed the point of no return, where no matter what we do as a council, it will all be to no avail. We, as a new council, have only been in office for a blink of your eye. But these councillors have had to find out for themselves the problems of the past, who are not here tonight, and come up with plans to fix them, and not just put a sticking plaster over a gaping wound. This will take time. The previous had, who not here, over 40 years. Over 40 years. Not all bad, I agree. We have had two. We do not have a bag of magic wands to dip into. That bag was emptied by the previous, who are not here tonight. We have had to make some difficult decisions to pave the way forward, a responsible, calculated way, to bring life back into the town centres, which, like other towns, are on their knees. I know many of you are not happy with the decisions of the Civic Hall, but at the start, neither was I. But once the Chinese whispers end, and you, the public, see for yourselves the true position of the money it has cost you, including me and everyone else, over the years, you may then begin to understand why this decision has been made. We are a responsible council, put here by you people, to act responsibly, and that is what we intend to do. We have a plan to inject our equivalent of a COVID booster jab into regenerating a new Civic Hall, library, office space, housing, multi-storey car park, which some people seem to be eluding to tell you about for whatever reason. This is all to save the town from any further deprivation. This new Civic Hall needs to be a multi-function establishment to secure its future, and not just put on a good show. Yes, I've been to the Ken Dodd shows, but every now and again, once a year, from this good gentleman over there. Once a year is not enough. It's not enough. Exactly. It needs to be. I allowed you the freedom to talk.
Ms West, you've had your say. Can you please let Mr Hammersley speak?
And I did listen
Councillor Hammersley.
politely. People Please learn from the mistakes of the past and let's put them right for the future of our town. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Hammersley. I've got Councillor Downs, then I understand that Councillor Croft wants to come in from Cabinet. Councillor Hammersley, can you turn your...
It's all right, I'll use it.
Oh, okay.
Okay, thanks, Chair. Guys, I'm from Bedworth. I was born and raised in Chapel Street, okay? I went to the Civic Hall as a kid on a Saturday morning. I'm gutted. Trust me when I say this, I am absolutely gutted. It's not our doing. Irrelevant to what Sam tells you, it's not our doing. It's his lot's doing for 47 years of mismanagement. They've never spent a penny doing our Civic Hall up. Right? It's rotten. Simple as that. You've got to agree with me when I say to you, it's easier to give birth than it is to resurrect the dead. Now then, because since we've took over, we've got the funding and the planning for a new leisure centre. If it wasn't for us, we wouldn't be getting that. You'd have the Labour lot sitting here now going, oh, it's got to shut, sorry, it's knackered, it's dead. It don't work like that. We're Bedworth. We stand for something. Brian, myself, all the other 8, because there's 10 of us. We will not let anybody put Bedworth down. Bedworth. Yeah? I've lived there all my life. I was born there. I'll die there. My kids were born there. My parents were born there. My grandparents. I'm 7 generations Bedworth. You really think we're going to stand to one side and go, you know what, Tech Civic Hall, Tech Leisure Centre, we don't really give a toss. No. It's Nuneaton and Bedworth. Yeah? We may be the little brother, but we've got a damn bigger punch. Yeah? Let us sort this out. Talk to us. Come to us. You've got all our details on the council website. Talk to us. If you think you can get £1 million and resurrect that Civic Hall, great, talk to us. Because trust me when I say it, we'll listen. But until then, let us put into place... It's not political.
Ms West, you've had your opportunity.
It's not political. No.
No, he did
it's
say...
$1 million.
Councillor Markham did say $1 million. There were
It's $1
different
million.
parts making that up.
Mate, I ain't got £1 million quid. I mean, we're the same as the rest of you. Yeah? Our gas and electric's 4 times what it was last year. You know. Hey? No, they haven't.
Mr Smith.
No, they haven't. That's the problem. We've had 47 years. Irrelevant of colour. Irrelevant of party. Listen to what I'm... Shut up. Listen
Mr.
to what I'm
Smith,
saying,
it's not your
please.
turn.
Right? 47 years of wasted money. Our money. That's why I stood. That's why Brian stood. That's why the other 8 stood. And I'll be damned if I'm going to let stupid people ruin it. Ruin our town. We've had over 40 years of it. Let us do what we think's right. And if you argue with us, argue with us. If you've got another plan to find $1 million, come and see us. But until then, don't go banging on about, oh, this, that and the other. If we can do it, we'll do it together. But at the minute, we ain't got $1 million. Because the last lot, his lot, spent it up the wall. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is Bedworth. Thank you very much.
Councillor Croft.
Thank you very much, Leader, and thank you to Councillor Downs. There were many points raised, and I've noted down quite a few of them, so sorry if some I don't address. Before I make my remarks, I heard Mr Margrave say that we'd basically, if I heard him correctly, he said something along the lines of we didn't use the business grants from the government. I mean, I can assure him we did, and we brought this to this council many times. We supported businesses no end. We gave the shop fit grants. We gave businesses grants directly to business. We cut the market rates, and we kept a lot of businesses open. And he knows full well that there are an awful lot of rules and strings attached to such grants. You cannot via such monies simply into general day-to-day spend just because you want to. And that is a point I would like to make, because this has come up across the piece when people refer to some of the existing regeneration projects, and Councillor Condacor referred to this. Local authority finance is very, very restricted. We've got different budgets for general fund spend and capital spend. There are a lot of very tight rules regarding that. So if you see that money is being spent on the capital account, that does not mean that you can just move it into day-to-day spend. So we have to be very careful of false hope being raised on that point. So, Mr. Mayor, not Mr. Mayor, sorry, Leader, there's a lot of points been raised tonight. They all come up against one immovable obstacle, which is the cost. You cannot get around that fact. You cannot get around the fact that we must balance the budget by law. We have to get to a balanced position at the end of the year. A gentleman said, why didn't we close it 18 months ago? This has become suddenly very acute, because we've had notice that the NHS contract has ended. 18 months ago, the NHS was in the building. We thought we were able to sustain it while we worked out a long-term solution. So there's been a lot of people who spoke very well tonight, but a lot of the remarks I've heard have been, how shall I say it, good sentiment. But I'm afraid happy memories and sentimentality does not pay the bills, as Councillor Wilson said. And the bills are very acute. Councillor Condacor referred to, and there was some reference to due diligence. We've sat here as the due diligence has been done over the years. You can look in a council budget book. It's all there. Every year it's been published. I remember sitting on the Audit and Standards Committee when the audit report was published, and the bar that Councillor Condacor referred to lost a quarter of the beer stock. And a bartender friend of mine said that if they stood there pouring it for fun, they couldn't have lost it. So this has been known about, not just for 18 months, but for decades. If we'd have looked at it 10, 20 years ago, you may have had a chance. But we are now in a very acute situation. And I'm afraid the ticket sales do not lie. I believe somebody mentioned competition from Birmingham and Coventry. And that is the point. Because the problem is, Councillor Wilson says very well, it is far too small of a theatre to get in the big acts on a sustainable basis. You might get one occasionally, but the problem is it will always lose out in its current form to Birmingham or Coventry, where they have the capacity to consistently put on big acts. And the ticket sales do not lie. It has never turned a profit, certainly in the figures I have, going back at least 12 years. If it had that kind of viability, it would have turned a profit. So I just put the figures. £800,000 loss, and it averages out, and that's on what's called the general fund. That's day-to-day spend. We have a £17 million, 16, 17, it varies over the years, general fund budget. How do you fund that? That is the key point, and we have to balance that. There's talking about, I had questions about what do we need to do. That's on the capital account. That's dilapidations cost. You'd need 700,000 for new boilers, for a new central heating system. You can't open a theatre for hundreds and hundreds of patrons without a functioning heating system. And Councillor Condacor has been in the press and going on a lot lately saying that we're over-borrowed and we can't borrow anymore. And that is quite correct in the sense that we should not be increasing borrowing. You shouldn't be increasing borrowing to do repairs on an existing asset. And again, he refers to an existing project. So, for example, Councillor Downs spoke very well about the leisure centre in Bedworth. That is being funded in large part by a government grant specifically for that, the Levelling Up Fund bid, which we were able to secure so that Bedworth did get a leisure centre, because the existing leisure centre isn't going to last. If we hadn't got that, we'd be talking about having to close two much-loved assets in Bedworth. Let there be no mistake about that. If we hadn't got that bid, there would have been no leisure centre. But because the government has given it to us for a specific purpose on the capital account, we cannot move that money over. And I want that to be understood, because I don't want there to be any false hope that, oh, you're spending money on this, shift it over. It doesn't work like that. We are constrained by the law. We're not like the government, where the Chancellor can just sort of issue some bonds and borrow to fund day-to-day spending. We cannot do that. And to put it quite bluntly, asking us to open it right now, asking open it first and then work out what happens, that is asking us to run it a loss. And what that means in effect is you are asking for cuts elsewhere. What else out of the budget do you want us to cut in year to balance the books? So Councillor Gutter's referred to, is it £2 million on the Parks contract? Should we take it down to less cuts a year? Should we go to 3 weekly bin collections? It's fascinating that Councillor Condacor supports that. I don't, because I think that we have a duty to public sanitation and public health in this borough, and to keep the place tidy and clean. And that's the point. We have to focus on what is the core function of a council. What is the role of government? And in hard times, you have to retrench to do what you have to do, not what you'd like to do. So, Mr. Chairman, we had a choice. We could either close it, or we could close it and present a vision of what regeneration in Bedworth could look like for a more sustainable future and for a brighter future. That is the choice we have taken, and now we are going to go out and try and find that private investment, an investment from other bodies to regenerate the town centre, because the alternative option is closure, full stop, and nothing would happen. So that is the choice we make, and that is the regrettable decision we have to make tonight. Thank you, Leader.
Thank you, Councillor Croft. Any other Cabinet member? Okay. I'd like to come in at this point and address some of the issues head on. Where I agree with some of the speakers is I think one of the speakers said it had been neglected for years. They were right. It has been neglected for years, for far too many years. And if the previous administration had actually done its job of looking at the difficult decisions about the chronic financial failings at the Civic Hall, we wouldn't be in this position today. If decisions had been different 10 years ago, putting it out to tender or asking another company to take it on might have been viable. It isn't anymore. Because in all likelihood, and from some soft market testing that we've done, having spoken to some people, they would still want us to subsidise it. They would still want us to pay hundreds of thousands of pounds to them to keep it open. Probably a bit less than what we're paying at the moment, but still a significant amount of money. Maybe able to shave £200,000 off if we were lucky. They would still want us to do all the capital works which Councillor Markham highlighted in her opening statement about putting in 3 new boilers at an approximate cost of £750,000, doing the £200,000 works to try and make it more energy efficient, although that is like trying to push water uphill because it is hugely energy inefficient to begin with. Such a large building requires a lot of power and energy to heat. That is a large open expanse in there that requires heating, and it is not cheap. Think about the bills that you're facing at the moment at home. You are facing heating your home doubling, trebling, quadrupling. The council is no different. We are still finding that those prices are going up too. Now, the council, as Councillor Croft alluded to, provides a lot of other services. And I ask, in all honesty, what would you have me cut to do that? We value our parks and open spaces. And that's £2 million worth or thereabouts of expenditure. Do you want me to stop cutting the football pitches that people go and play on? Do you want me to have vast fields going uncut in our prize-winning parks? No, you don't want that, because we've heard it time and time again. Last year when we first took control, when Glendale was requiring firm handling from myself and Councillor Guttridge, you weren't happy at that. Taking more money away from parks and open spaces would mean that even more of you would be unhappy with that. We have people in our borough who need financial assistance because they aren't that well off, due to whatever circumstance. We spend over £1.5 million on benefits. Do you want me to cut them to the people who are some of the most vulnerable in our society? No, I don't think you do. What about homelessness? We have to spend around about £350,000 a year on that, and as you saw in the previous Cabinet report, that cost is increasing. We have a statutory duty to keep people for 56 days once they have been made homeless, unless they are intentionally homeless. more often than not, we have to put them up in a B&B or a hotel, although we have some limited accommodation ourselves. And that costs us between £95 and £100 a night. Times that over 56 days by the number of people who need our help. From the government, we get back in subsidy £95 or thereabouts a week. Do you want me to not protect or help the homeless? Or planning, and I know that planning is a very emotive issue, and it's been raised tonight. We've had all these extra thousands of homes come into the borough, and I agree, because it wasn't my choice about where the homes went. But we still want the people who want a mini extension, or to change a door, or to put in a new window, or build an outbuilding. They still need a planning service. That costs us over £400,000 a year. And what about your bins and recycling? Unlike Coventry, where they had months and months of strikes which caused rubbish in the streets, we took tough action here as a council to keep those services going. Those services cost us £2 million to run. Do you want me to do, as Councillor Condacor suggests, at cutting the bin collections to 3 weekly? Some people may survive that, sure. But there are a lot of people in our borough who wouldn't. And we have the green bin tax, which was introduced by the former Labour administration, voted for by Mr Margrave when he was a councillor. If we were to, just to put this into... Mr Margrave, you have had your say.
I was against the green bin tax.
You didn't vote against it.
I was not on the council. I know you don't know the figures and you don't know the facts, but I was not on the council at the
Mr
time.
Margrave, Mr Margrave, you have had your say.
I'm a resident, you serve us, not the other way round. You're not here to be rude to members of the public and lie. You've already lied enough.
I have not...
care because I'm a resident, I'm not a councillor.
Mr Margrave.
I will not put up with you lying.
Mr Margrave, I have not lied.
I will be reporting you to the Standards Committee.
Feel free. And one more outburst, I'll ask the porters to remove you from this meeting. We have listened to what you have to say in silence. I expect you to do the same in return as a common courtesy.
Mr Margrave wasn't on the council at the time.
If he isn't, then I do apologise. But it was his group that did. The reality is that if we did put up the green bin tax, which currently stands at £40, we would be looking at increasing it by another £25.52 to keep the Civic Hall open. You'd be paying £65 a year for your green bin tax. Not everyone can afford that. That would mean the recycling rates would go down in terms of green bin charges. Or we could look at increasing council tax by 6.6%, which would just about cover the Civic Hall alone. Not to mention all the other services that we are under financial pressure. So that would, to cover some of the issues that we are facing, the council tax, if we were to look at council tax alone, would see an astronomical increase. But we are capped by law at a 2% increase. We do not have the option of saying, if you want to keep the Civic Hall open, pay more in your council tax, because we don't have that option. If we do, we have to have a referendum, which costs money. And I don't think the result of that referendum would be favourable. And this isn't just a Bedworth issue. I know that someone mentioned that it was the residents of Bedworth who paid for it. Since 1974, it is the residents of Nuneaton, Bedworth and Bulkington who have paid consistently for this Civic Hall. It is a borough issue, not just a Bedworth one. Actually, if you look at the figures, Bedworth is approximately just short of 30% of the overall council tax base that pays for these services. And we do it because we are one borough. In fact, for the leisure centre which is being built, that, as Councillor Croft quite rightly said, if we hadn't have got the funding for it, would have had to close, £5 million of that funding is coming from Section 106 monies from the Arbury development which is forecast. Most of those residents will use Nuneaton for their primary source of shopping and town centre facilities on the Bermuda area. They won't go into Bedworth, but that money is being transferred from Nuneaton into Bedworth to support that. But because we are one borough, we have supported that. We have, as a council, looked at supporting Bedworth. We had the sanctuary event, and I disagree with those who said it was a nonsense and a waste. For a start, the money came from government support for businesses. If you read the Cabinet papers later on for agenda item number 6, 70% of all the money that was spent on that went directly into the local economy. 3 people I know of, having spoken to the organisers, directly gained jobs because of that event. They would have been unemployed without that event. Indeed, Mr. Hunt, your cafe benefited greatly from having that sanctuary event. We had hundreds of thousands of people over the course of that week come into Bedworth. We had the Archbishop of Canterbury, people from Leeds and London and further away. People in New York heard of Bedworth who would never have heard of it before. Look at the stats in that report. A reach of over 7 billion people who were contacted in some way, shape or form by the sanctuary event. We have put the market back into the heart of the town centre because we know the town centre is the beating heart of Bedworth, and that's what people wanted. It has increased footfall in the town centre. We have provided a new BMX track, as I said earlier, for Bedworth, new tennis courts in Bedworth. That is not levelling down or relegating Bedworth at all. That is supporting Bedworth. It is one of the fundamental layers and pillars of this borough council. Now, some people say, give us the time. And my heart says, yes, I would like to do that. But time is a luxury we don't have. We have to balance the books, as Councillor Croft has said. There are 7 people who, I think it's 7 people, who are employed at the Civic Hall. It is never an easy decision to put someone's job at risk, and I deeply regret having to make that decision. But the least they are owed from me as leader of the council is the certainty of knowing whether they have a job or not. Keeping this open-ended is not fair to them, and there are also significant HR implications that go with it, the amount of notice they have to be given, the amount of consultation that has to be given. If I turned around to you and said your job was being cut tomorrow, you would quite rightly be upset, and that is not a position I am prepared to put those staff in. The vaccination centre. The vaccination centre was set up before we took control 18 months ago, and we supported, in opposition, using it as a vaccination centre. They use a limited part of the Civic Hall. Indeed, I was there earlier, and they're really confined to the main auditorium and some of the areas out the back towards the loading bay, etc. There is a vast labyrinth of rooms and offices and dressing rooms there that would need to be refurbished and brought up to standard. The works that Councillor Margrave referred to were not like to do, they were must do. We cannot carry on just papering over the cracks. That is what has happened for far too long at the Civic Hall. I don't want to make this decision. And I'm sure that you wish I wasn't making this decision. In that, we are in agreement, ladies and gentlemen. But leadership requires making difficult decisions for all of Nuneaton and Bedworth. I have to set a balanced budget. I heard someone said it is disgusting. What would be disgusting is telling the homeless that we can't help them. What would be disgusting is telling the people who need benefits. No, you said that what I was saying was disgusting. I don't think it is disgusting, laying out the facts to the residents. Okay. This isn't patronising. This is laying out the cold hard facts. I'll let you in, but then I really shouldn't. But I'll let you say one thing. Yes. There isn't a pot of funding equivalent to the size of the leisure centre. We have applied. Hang on, let me just answer the question. We applied for funding from the Arts Council so that we could look at the more in-depth feasibility work on the Civic Hall. That application was rejected. We weren't given a reason, were we? No, we weren't given a specific reason. Lots of authorities bid for money from the Arts Council, and we weren't given a reason why it was rejected. They have a lot of bids that they have to go back and answer to. They have a lot of bids that they have to go back and answer to, and that they have rejected. They don't give us each individual tailored feedback. That is part of the problem, I have to admit, with the bidding process. But no. Brent? We have no right of appeal on funding decisions. It was put out in a press release by the council. Ian, I think it was approximately 2 or 3 months ago, at least. It was put out there. It was made public. It was put in the public domain. It was indeed. The decision was not made until the week last Wednesday. That was when we had the final decision from the NHS that they wanted to withdraw, and when we saw the plans for the proposed regeneration of Bedworth Town Centre. That was when everything came together and we had to make a decision. We could not delay it any further. I'm not going to keep answering questions from the public because that isn't actually in accordance with the rules, but what I would say is up until that point, we were looking at every viable option to keep the Civic Hall going and pursuing the regeneration angle. Because the two are linked, but they aren't, you can twin track them. You could have kept the Civic Hall, if we could have kept the Civic Hall open longer, whilst we got the regeneration underway, we would have done so, but the finances just don't stack up. That is the problem. I really, really wish I didn't have to make this decision, because I wouldn't be going, you guys wouldn't be as upset as you are, I wouldn't be having all of the hassle and, as I say, the death threats I've received. But I have to make a difficult decision. No, I'm sorry, but I've already bent the rules enough tonight. No. I'm not on the clock, Mr. Smith. And you didn't put down to speak on this item. We know what the answer will be, that you want to keep it open and you don't want to make the difficult decisions. No, I'm sorry, but the rules are there in the Constitution for me to abide to, and I have bent the rules quite significantly.
All I wish to say is I accept everything that you have said about the services that you provide and the importance of looking after homeless. I accept that. But the Civic Hall could be a profit-making enterprise and it could support those services. That's all I want to say.
The reality is the Civic Hall has never made a profit and will never make a profit. It has cost, if I find my figures.
I'm talking about what you as a council could do.
The best chance for a functioning, profitable, working, sustainable Civic Hall is the regeneration plans we have put forward. That is the reality of the situation. I'm not going to keep going on about this. I have been as lenient as I possibly can. Everyone who put down to speak, sir, has been allowed to speak, and I have brought in people who weren't on the list. I get the emotion in this room, I really do. That is why I have let people come in and speak, even though they haven't put their names down. But I do have to bring this to a conclusion. We cannot keep deferring these decisions. The problem is, it does cost us money to keep deferring these decisions. No, I'm not taking any more interventions. I'm not angry, but I'm trying to keep. I'm trying to keep this meeting to order. I appreciate that emotions are high, but at the end of the day, we have a decision to make. So I'm going to bring this to a vote. I'm sorry, sir, I'm not. I've brought in a number of people who didn't put their names down to speak. Everyone was given an opportunity to put their names down to speak. I'm going to bring this to a vote now. We have the recommendation. No, the call-in situation is entirely up to the opposition. The recommendations are those as printed before us, Cabinet members. All those in favour of the decision, please show. The recommendations are carried. There were 4 there and me, that is 5. There are 5 members present of the Cabinet tonight. Cabinet is the executive decision body of the Council. 6. 5. That is the legislation which sets how we are governed. It can be called in, but that is a process which has to be observed. I'm going to adjourn the meeting now for 10 minutes to allow those who wish to leave the room do so, and for those who are staying to have a drink or a comfort break. Can we stop the live stream, please? All right, thank you very much, everyone. We'll reconvene the meeting of the Cabinet. So we will now return to the agenda as printed, which means that we are on to agenda item number 6, which is the sanctuary event. Councillor Markham. I'm happy to move it if you want. I'll move it anyway, and you can second. So I'll move the report on the sanctuary event. So we have a report before us to actually show what some of the results were as a part of the sanctuary event that was held in May this year. As you can see, particularly at paragraph 3.4 of the agenda, it outlines the actual hard outcomes from the sanctuary event, which I am actually really proud of as leader of the council. It has put Bedworth on the international stage, national as well. We actually had people who have never heard of Bedworth before actually talking about us, and in a positive way, and showing that, true to form, Bedworth is the town that never forgets. This was about remembering those who had lost loved ones during the COVID pandemic, and for other reasons too. And as someone who went and visited the event, I have to say the messages from those who had lost loved ones were very, very poignant and heartfelt indeed, and it was impossible not to be moved by the messages that were left. And the wonder that was experienced by the vast, vast, vast majority of those on the actual night itself, it was a truly moving experience because it brought the community together in a way that I think shows Nuneaton and Bedworth off at its best. It was silent, it was respectful, it was dignified, and it brought us together in a sense of remembrance. So as we can see, there were just short of 17,000 visitors to the sanctuary, plus 10,000 visitors for the burn, 412 workshop participants, 70% of the project budget was spent locally. We got to over 7.5 billion people on the comms reach, and we had over 20 volunteers come and support the event too, as well as those directly working in the report. So I think this is a really good testament to what the council can deliver, and having the residents of Bedworth on side too. Does it receive a seconder? Councillor Markham. Thank you. We do have, if I find my list, here we go. 2 public speakers, if I'm right. Mrs. Condacor first.
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, I've still got mixed views as to the value of it, but I know people who had lost people certainly found it very sort of helpful, I think. I wondered if there's actually a sort of more, this is very summarised thing, because some of the figures quoted, for example, 20% of the sanctuary audience identified as having a disability or long-term condition, seems very odd to me, and 10% of the sanctuary audience had never heard, because I don't know, I found loads of friends who went. We bumped into quite a lot of people there at the burn things. No one has had any, what do you call it? Survey, that's right. So I just wonder, some of these figures, I'd just be interested to know where they came from, or how many people they actually asked, and have they just sort of, sorry, I'm tired, my words are, I'm losing my words, extrapolated from that. It seems a shame, I mean, obviously, yes, it did give a big boost to the name Bedworth and things, but will there be a long-lasting thing is, my big question, and could that money from the Arts Recovery Grant actually have been better spent to have a much longer-lasting thing? Because people may have heard of Bedworth, but if they didn't hear about it in that 1 week when they could actually get there, it had been and gone. So that's why I've still got questions, but, you know, hopefully it will have had positive for enough people. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Condicle. Most of the data has been supplied by Artichoke, who were behind the event. That's what we have had presented to us as a council, and I thought it was important to bring that report to Cabinet to highlight that. But in answer to one of your questions with the funding, I think having 70% of the project budget spent locally is actually a good news story on that front. And whilst I appreciate the question about the number of people who were disabled or had issues, I don't have any direct empirical evidence, but what I can say is when I went there on a number of times, I did actually see people physically in wheelchairs accessing it, and leaving their own message. I think even one visited the Archbishop of Canterbury, was there talking to the Archbishop. So I do know that they accessed it, and yes, it was a challenging terrain. I don't think anyone would deny that, but there were provisions to get people up there. There was standing put down for people to get in there, so I can confirm anecdotally that that was the case. Any questions of clarification from Cabinet? No. Mr. Smith.
Right. Firstly, I'd like to address the nature of the event held in Bedworth, as the words you lot use don't seem to mean a lot. You say regeneration, and the public see destruction. You use sanctuary. The public, on the night I was there, saw a satanic ritual. This event was clearly that, evidenced by the people invited by the government to design and deliver this ritual. David Best and Artichoke have long history of organising rituals around the world, most notably the Burning Man event in Blackrock, Nevada. These rituals, the structure they built, had occult and Masonic symbolism built into them, much like this chamber. The ceremony of burning is an occult thing, nothing to do with anything else. After 15 minutes of the event starting, 80% of the public left, realising that they'd been conned by the government and the local politicians into attending a satanic ritual. It beggars belief, really. You've proved this evening, earlier, and now on this, if this event was such a success, why was it never mentioned again on any of your social media? Yeah? Ever. Not once. You got to it, everybody realised, the people around here, I've had hundreds of people come to me and say they were absolutely disgusted, yeah? That they've been conned by you and the government into holding a satanic ritual in Bedworth. Fortunately, one of our members cleansed the place after, which was evidenced in the Telegraph with the cross that was put there, yeah? To cleanse the area after the ritual that you lot held. You should hang your heads in shame, all of you, yeah? And the other corporate politicians that sent them people here to do that. You didn't fool no one. And if you have the courage of your convictions, yeah, come out with me, outside in the town centre, and I'll stand there with my sign, and you can stand there and say what a great sign, what a great thing it was. Yeah, you daren't even put it on your social media. You know you'll get slaughtered for what it was, a satanic ritual. Yeah, you showed your colours, where you stand. Yeah, and I'd like to remind you also, yeah, as much as you may think it is a little boys' club where you hold power in here, this is the people's parliament.
Mr. Smith, you've had your 3 minutes. Yeah? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Right, now that we'll re-enter the realms of... sorry, long night. Not any non-cabinet member. Councillor Condicle.
Thank you very much, Chair. It has been a long week. Like Michelle, I've got mixed feelings, because when someone said we're going to build a giant structure and set fire to it, it would naturally sort of rang alarm bells with me. But I do think the Artichoke people did a lot of engagement events with members, etc., to explain what it was. And I have a couple of questions. I mean, the biggie is about the offsetting of all that CO2 and all that stuff, because they did say, don't worry, we'll all be offsetted and whatever, but we haven't heard anything in this report about that aspect of it. And also, some residents came to me at the early stage of COVID when they lost people and said, are we going to have a memorial of some kind, a bench, a tree, and we raised that at council. I think it was actually before your lot took control, but I think it would be good to remember that we need, for some people, a physical place to go and remember their lost partner or whatever. So sanctuary is good for some people who like that spiritual thing, but I think it can't be the only COVID memorial we have. I think some people would like some sort of feature which will be a COVID memorial. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Condacourt. Any Cabinet member? Councillor Croft.
Very briefly, Leader, I do count myself a sceptic, and I won't deny that I made a certain number of jokes about a certain 1970s folk horror film when you proposed the idea to me. But I have to say, it does seem to have been a great success. And the point I wanted to make was that the funding that we offered to it was part of the government business grant, which was designed not so much for a permanent memorial, but for a fiscal stimulus during the very difficult times of the pandemic. And as you say, 70% of the money, I believe, was spent within the Bedworth area itself. And if we could have helped any small business stay in the black during a very difficult year, then it was worth doing. And I must say, the comic relief has left the building, but I don't think we've been able to keep Director Hollis and our communications team quiet about shouting about how great it was. I think it's been amply advertised. Thank you very much, Leader.
Thank you very much, Councillor Croft. I think most right-minded people will actually see some of the comments for the bile and fantasy that they are. They are completely inaccurate, not to mention the fact that I also have 2 women on the Cabinet. This isn't a male-dominated authority, and there are a number of female councillors here, and female officers as well, for that matter. And to the best of my knowledge, not that it matters, no one is a Mason. Has absolutely nothing to do with the situation at hand. It's just frightening that some people actually believe these folk stories. All those in favour of the recommendations, please show. Okay, that is carried. Thank you very much. Right. So that moves us on to agenda item number 7, which is the response to the consultation by the Local Government Boundary Commission on the warding arrangements for Nuneaton and Bedworth Borough Council. And I will be moving the report as printed and with the various addenda that went with it. You're looking at me slightly confused there.
No.
Oh, that's all right. I thought I'd forgotten something then for a minute. Okay. So just to put a few facts on the table here, this is not the council deciding its own boundaries for what will happen 2024 onwards. This is our response to the formal consultation. The ultimate decision on where the ward boundaries will lie will be with the Boundary Commission itself. We have had to go through a rigorous process on this, and it hasn't been easy, especially, I have to say, with the software, which I think most of us who experienced it will be quite happy if we never see it again. By law, we have to have an average number of councillors, sorry, an average number of electors per councillor. We are then allowed in the warding arrangements to deviate on that by a maximum of either plus or minus 10%. I am happy to report that the addenda before us show that all of the wards, as we are proposing to be the council's submission, are within the tolerance as prescribed by the Local Government Boundary Commission. We do have to have an eye on existing community settlements and respecting natural boundaries, of which I have to say there are a large amount in this borough, which has made the scale of the challenge even more difficult. We have canals, we have rivers, we have train lines, we have main arterial routes, all in such a very confined, relatively speaking, space. And that has made some of the warding arrangements challenging, but not impossible. And we have tried to respect those boundaries wherever we can. Another complicating factor has also been the sheer amount of development which has taken place in the borough over the past 10 years or so, and due to continue through, because our figures have to be, to an extent, future-proofed to 2028. Those are the figures that the Boundary Commission have forecasted for us. Members may remember in our submission that went to full council, I think it was April time, if memory serves, we were initially forecasting around about 102,000 electors by 2028, bearing in mind that we're currently around about 93 to 95,000, just off the top of my head. The Local Government Boundary Commission have actually come forward with a figure that they have allowed of just short of 117,000. I think everyone would acknowledge that is a significant increase between now and 2028. We are fortunate as well that they have taken into account a large number of the developments which have been granted planning permission across the borough. They did ask for a bit more information, as I understand, but they accepted the rationale behind everything, I understand, that we put forward, because we had a sound evidence base to demonstrate that we had all these planning permissions coming forwards, and it would be fair to allow those to be included. Just to highlight another challenge is if we did nothing, with most of the developments taking place in Weddington, St Nicholas and Whitestone over the traditionally and coming forwards, Weddington, if we did nothing, would have around about 12,000 voters, St Nick's around about 9,000 voters, and Whitestone around 7,500 voters. That is not sustainable or indeed a fair and equitable distribution for any councillor's workload. That has resulted in the 2 additional wards being put in the St Nicholas, Weddington and Whitestone areas. That has necessitated some moves around of existing boundaries, and wherever possible we have tried to tie up with some elements of county council boundaries, and some we have disagreed with county council boundaries because we don't see a natural synergy between them. So, for example, if you look at the Galley Common county seat, it has 3 polling districts of Kingswood, and there is only one access, which is Tunnel Road, which is a very narrow access underneath the railway line. There is not a natural connection in the community between those 3 polling districts of Kingswood and the rest of Galley Common. However, for example, in my own neck of the woods and with Councillor Gutteridge, if you look at the polling districts of, I think it's ATF and ATG, they were pre-1999 in the Whitestone ward, and they consider themselves to be in the Whitestone ward now, as I can attest to the queries that I get as a ward councillor. So it has not been an easy undertaking by any stretch of the imagination. If you move one bit here, it can mean that another bit elsewhere has to move, and getting everyone to tolerance was a bit like whack-a-mole in some respects. You get one, then another one pops up. So I will move the report as printed. Does that receive a seconder? Thank you. Councillor Markham. Let me just find my papers. I've got one speaker on this agenda item, which is Mr Margrave.
Thank you, Councillor Wilson. Thank you, Mr Chairman. I speak today to ask the Cabinet to place proposals online and ask local people for their views before submission. You're submitting on our behalf as council representatives. Even the smallest change is complex and will need officer assistance. So if a community group puts forward an issue with some of the things that you've done, you've used software that the public simply don't have. These proposed wards, I believe, do not reflect our community well, and I appreciate it must have been hard for some councillors to have local knowledge, especially in Attleborough, where both of my councillors live outside the ward and only one moved from Leicester to Nuneaton shortly before being elected. But I appreciate how difficult it is to represent an area they don't live in, but community identity matters. So you need to get this right. Attleborough now takes in the town centre, meaning we are no longer a distinct community as we have been for generations, just merged into Nuneaton town centre. We have more in common with Caldwell, Red Deeps or the new Stirling Gate development than Oaston Road. I welcome the changes to Marston Lane and the unification of Whitestone. But what will the impact of including the town centre in Attleborough have on crime reporting and our insurance premiums? Collycroft doesn't take in all of Collycroft. Part of Camp Hill is removed from this new Camp Hill ward. Exhall is being joined up in a way that no one recognises and is justified because there's a Gurdwara, which is an alarming piece of racial profiling. You've divided communities and even roads, not down the middle, but literally split in half. Roads. That's confusing. There are so many of these wards that don't have things in common and don't reflect the community's identity. While I appreciate you want to take away Labour's electoral advantage, and that's possibly even laudable, it isn't the role of a boundary review, and it shouldn't be playing that role. I don't know if there's a deadline to respond with the council's submission. All I know is the last administration failed to listen to local people, and I'm asking you not to do the same, because I believe that if you put this out to community groups and to ask local people, they could give you feedback that could help you rejig things to make this the best submission possible. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Margrave. Any point of clarification? No. Any non-council, any non-cabinet member? Councillor Richard Baxter-Payne first, then Councillor Condacall.
Thank you, Chair. I'd just like to ask Mr. Margrave why it's important that
Councillor, you can't ask a question of Mr. Margrave because you're not a member of the cabinet. You can make a statement.
I just find it really strange how it's a fascination that I chose to come to live in Nuneaton. I chose to represent the ward of Attleborough, and I'm fairly certain that the people that I've been dealing with on a daily basis in Attleborough would not share his sentiment that I don't know the area, I don't understand its problems, and I'm not working hard to do things in the area that will improve it. He's often sent me emails, I've often offered to meet him, and he's never yet accepted that to come and sit down and have a face-to-face meeting with me yet, so he can discuss his issues with me.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Richard Baxter-Payne. Councillor Condacall.
Thank you very much, Chair. I understand the issues you'd have had with the software, because I also have tried to have a dab at it. But I do think we have got some serious problems with what is being proposed, particularly around my neck of woods. I love representing people. My ward is 25% bigger probably than anyone else's, and was actually probably the thing that really caused the boundary review. I got to the point where I had to print 5,000 leaflets, whereas most wards are about 3,000. So you can see the size of Wellington will effectively double, and the same for St Nicholas almost, with all the stuff up the long shoot. But what we have is a problem, because from going from about 97,000 to 116,000 electors in these 6 years, we're actually providing voting opportunities for houses that are yet to be built. And in the case of Top Farm, a vast amount of electors, probably about 5,000 or 4,000, are assumed to live on the Top Farm site in 5 years' time. And that simply will not be the case. So your proposed, I think it's Milby ward, will be tiny. It currently has 1,200 and something houses in your proposed boundary. And if Top Farm isn't built out magically by 2028 elections, yeah, that's going to be a very, very tiny electorate. And so there is a problem here. And some wards like Camp Hill have 4,000 houses. So I understand how difficult it is, but I think we do need to make a better solution. And also, I am going to propose splitting the Top Farm development in half, so we're not putting it all in one ward, because if it does or doesn't get developed, then it really does make bizarre choices. And the planning permissions and the development of 1,700 houses is a decade worth job if it happens. Also, points like Attleborough Attleborough ward in your proposals has got ridiculously long and thin. It looks like a cigar. So as a councillor, I think we do need to try and make our wards sort of round or square or something. So geographically, that they're not representing areas that are many miles apart, but only a tiny quarter of a mile or third of a mile wide. So I will be presenting some alternative proposals. And I am very concerned that we've got so much housing that won't be built, particularly with the government trashing the economy and making mortgages unaffordable. We're going to end up with electoral wards that are very small in terms of population, which mean actually we're going to have quite a case of unequal representation. I'd love to represent as many people as I want. I want my ward to be as big as possible within reason. But I do think we also need to move to PR or something. So actually we don't have this bizarre thing where different voters have a different effective vote. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Condacourt. Any point of clarification? No? Any Cabinet member wish to speak? No? Okay. I won't take any lectures from people who have stood in multiple wards for areas that they don't or have not lived in and then pontificate on other people doing exactly the same as they have done. I think that's unfair and, to be quite honest, an element of double standards. In direct answer to the point of Attleborough, that is one of the areas I was referring to with the county council boundaries trying to introduce an element of coterminosity, because the county boundary currently goes down and includes the King Edward Road and around there, so following on down Attleborough Road down to that point as well, and it makes sense. It is also connected by Attleborough Road, which goes up through Highfield Road and up Lutterworth Road. There is therefore a big spinal element where all that housing will, or proposed ward, would come off. As I say, there is no easy answer or solution to this, but what I can confidently say is that we have tried to respect communities wherever possible. Housing numbers, particularly in Galley Common and Camp Hill, for example, have also forced an explosion there, so you cannot keep all of what was traditionally Galley Common and all of what was traditionally Camp Hill in the same ward, because it would breach the legislation. So we have to cut it off somewhere, and we have tried to find natural delineation points along main arterial routes to do that. But the ultimate arbiter will be the Boundary Commission, and anyone who has an interest in this can make a submission up to the 7th of November, I believe it is. I'm getting nods from the head of electoral services. So they can submit that, and I don't think anyone could say that we haven't advertised this, because it has been in social media and it has been all over Facebook with paid adverts. I don't know whether that was us or the Boundary Commission. Boundary Commission. Okay, the Boundary Commission did it, and I know whenever I scroll through on Facebook, it seems to pop up constantly, and a number of comments on there, some good, some bad, but that's people's choice. So I'm happy to move the recommendations as printed to go to next week's Cabinet. Council, it is a long night. All those in favour, please show. Okay, that is carried. Thank you very much. That moves us on to agenda item number 8, which is the equality policy, which I will move from the chair, subject to the actual final version having my name spelt correctly. I will sign it off if it is passed by Cabinet. Basically, it is a legal document that we have to have under the Equality Act 2010. So that is all that Cabinet is doing tonight. So I'm happy to move that from the chair. Does that receive a seconder? Councillor Smith, thank you. I'm not aware of any public speakers on that. Any non-Cabinet member? No? Okay. Any Cabinet member wish to come in? No? In which case we'll move to the recommendations. All those in favour, please show. That is carried. Thank you very much. And that moves us on to agenda item number 9, which is the tenancy fraud policy. Thank you, Councillor Guttridge. In the absence of Councillor Golby, I will move the report from the chair. It basically sets out a policy to look at where there are instances of tenancy fraud, how we investigate them and how we enforce any breaches of the policy. Does that receive a seconder? Councillor Croft, thank you very much. I don't think there are any public speakers on this one. No. Any non-cabinet member wish to speak? No. Any cabinet member? No. In which case we'll move to the vote. All those in favour, please show. That is carried. Thank you very much. That moves us on to agenda item number 10, which is the benefit fraud penalty and prosecution policy. Councillor Croft.
Thank you, Leader. Hopefully the temperature should come down now. This is part of our continuing, effectively, corporate governance reform agenda, just to formalise in policy form for future reference and for consistency the existing practice on anti-fraud. Our message on this is that we will always support those in need if we can. We will always try and look after people under the principle of mutual obligation, but we will never tolerate fraud from benefits, because they are not just defrauding the council's money, they are defrauding the money of their fellow citizens and taxpayers. So I shall move the report, and I shall just take this opportunity, because you've sat here very patiently all evening, to commend our counter-fraud officer, who is absolutely fantastic and has saved many thousands and thousands for the taxpayers of this borough over the years. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much for that, Councillor Croft, and I will second that from the Chair. Any non-cabinet member wish to speak? Councillor Condical.
Only very briefly, but I think counter-fraud stuff is really important, and we've got lots of people in need, and the people who are abusing systems and putting in false claims are effectively making the system harder for everyone else. I don't know how much data stuff we do now in terms of matching all the various benefit frauds and all the different things, but yeah, it is really sound investment, and like if you catch someone who's doing one thing, they're probably doing all sorts of other things as well. So it's probably worth working out how much sort of spin-off stuff is detected by the council's activities. And the other thing I always worry about is things like single homes council tax rebates and things like that, and empty homes. There's a lot of different things that, yeah, we do need people to be honest, because that way it's cheaper for everyone else. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Condical. Any point of clarification? No. Any cabinet member? No. I would like to echo Councillor Croft's comments and thank the officers for all the hard work they've done on that. Every pound that they save or recover is a pound we can put back into frontline services, and I think that is vitally important. As Councillor Condical has quite rightly said, those who play the system should be found out, and we should be able to focus the resources at areas of greatest need, and that is exactly what this administration and council will do. All those in favour of the recommendations, please show. Okay, thank you very much. That moves us on to agenda item number 11, which is the General Fund Budget Outturn 21-22. Councillor Croft.
Thank you very much, Leader. Very briefly, this will go out to audit. This is a backwards-looking document. This is the General Fund accounts as at the end of the year, back in March. I can only apologise to Cabinet again for the delays, and I went into some detail at the Council in July as to the cause of that, but we're now getting back on track thanks to the sterling work of our new Finance Director and 151 Officer, and the reforms we're making in the finance team to the chart of accounts, the month-end processes, and the structure. The headline from the figures is that we were £60,000 up on our projected surplus at or thereabouts at the end of the year, which is partly due to government grants, but it is a very welcome addition to our reserves moving into this year. So I would suggest that we approve this so that it can go out to audit and we can get the final accounts signed off and processed.
Great. Thank you, Councillor Croft. Does that receive a seconder? Thank you, Councillor Markham. Any non-cabinet member? Oh, sorry, sorry, Mrs. Condical, I've got your name down.
I didn't want to say a lot of things, but again, it was just really disappointing that this report only came out yesterday. I mean, is there not anything in the Constitution that states that agendas and paperwork and everything should be available 5 clear working days ahead? Surely if it's not ready for a meeting, it should go to the next meeting, or you call an additional meeting for when it's ready. I mean, I've not actually got anything particular to say on thing, because it's really a statement of what's occurred in the past as opposed to what's about to happen, and I know it's quite a messy one because it sort of between the two administrations and things. But I was just concerned about the rules and things, because if it had been something that was, you know, more up to date and things, I would not have had time to even glance at it.
Okay, thank you, Mrs. Condacourt. Any non-cabinet member? Councillor Condacourt.
Thank you, Chair. It's late in the day, and I have actually already asked the officers some questions which I had some good answers to save time. But a few things need highlighting. We're using a lot of reserves, and I think that's these accounts and the ones for the current year. Yeah, we're winding down our reserves position, which is something to be careful of. And also there's things in here that we aren't using the reserves for, like borough plan, CCT replacement and things. There's lots of things been running late, which are really things we should get moving with. And the way the accounts work, spending the money in the right year we're actually cheaper because of inflation. But yeah, I think we do need to watch some of this slippage stuff, because it looks like we're spending less money, but effectively we're not doing stuff that we should have done. And like Michelle, it would be useful to have a few more. I know all the reasons why it's late, but if this could have had a few more days, so it was pre-weekend, we could have gone through a few more of the bits. But there's some good news in here as well. And I think one thing we really need to get advertised more is how much we make from recycling. Because one of the things that the horrendous rise in commodity prices, the oil and the metals, is actually there's real value in our recycling bin. And if we can actually get people to recycle more and not contaminate them by putting the wrong stuff in, we could actually have a few £100,000 more for the things we want to do, like arts and stuff. So I would ask that the council really celebrate how much we get from recycling, but also like Stratford-upon-Avon is actually going on to free weekly systems. Lots of people to get more recycling, to encourage people to recycle more. And going on and on about all the problems of free weekly, we really need to get our recycling and waste stuff cheaper. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Condacourt. Any points of clarification? I would just highlight that there are a number of earmarked reserves in there which were specifically to deal with some of the COVID issues, to coin a phrase, particularly with a COVID reserve and also a business rates reserve, because there were particular issues with that. And I think it's important that we note that there are some drawing down of reserves which was designed to happen, so that we could safeguard future income streams. And with regards to the reports and Mrs. Condacourt, I would just refer you back to the points I made earlier in the meeting. The Constitution says that it has to be on the agenda has to be printed a minimum of 5 working days. It doesn't actually say that the contents of the agenda have to be printed at the same time. I would agree, in an ideal world, it would be nice to have them 5 working days in advance, but when I know that I have officers actually working when they are on their annual leave to try and dig us out of some holes because of our chronic staffing issues, I think getting it when we have done is quite plauditable to the laudable. Sorry, it is a long night. It's quite laudable to the officers who have that much dedication, but also the tenacity to get on with some of the underlying problems that we face. So I note the point, and I hope that in future, and I know that the officers hope that that will improve in future, but we are on our way through a process to do that. All those in favour of the recommendations, please show. Okay, that is carried. Thank you very much. That moves us on to the Housing Revenue Account, outturn 21-22. Councillor Croft.
Thank you, Leader. I'll move the report. This is exactly the same scenario, only for the HRA. The headline is, I would just sound a note of caution, while we are 467k underspent, I will just caution on that, because as has been alluded to, that will be due to slippage, partly due to the staffing shortages, and cannot be relied upon in future years. But otherwise I shall move it so we can get them audited and get rid for this year.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Croft. Does that receive a seconder? Councillor Smith, thank you very much. There are no public speakers. Councillor Condacourt, non-cabinet member.
Thank you. The housing account is actually bigger than the normal account. I think people forget we have a big debate over the general fund, and then the housing fund is half as much again. So it should be covered a lot more, really, and there's a lot of really important stuff for housing stock does, but also there's a lot of underspends or non-delivered stuff, particularly on the grounds maintenance. When we do less grounds maintenance, we take that as a saving, whereas if you go around some of the sites, the grounds maintenance is just not being done in places. And it is, I mean, Councillor Guttridge will tell me keep putting forms in, but I say we need to make sure we get the grounds maintenance on our housing sites like Cleaver Gardens, Ryde Avenue, as good as people would expect, because a lot of the leaseholders are paying for that. Yeah, we're paying for a service and they're not always getting it. The other thing I wanted to just raise was this money we got put aside for climate change adaptation, £150,000, which I understand was supposed to be things like solar panels, low energy landlord lighting, all sorts of things that actually would be invest to save effectively, because you know what energy prices are like now. It would only take 3, 4, 5 years for some of that £150,000 to generate. So it's a great shame that money wasn't spent on environmental things that would actually save energy, either our own or our tenants' energy. And I do hope that's getting progressed now, and we're not missing an opportunity to A, save energy, and B, make sure we import less gas and oil and things from other countries. All this green stuff, which was most derided by some people, when done to our housing stock, is a win-win-win for everyone. And to have £150,000 sitting there doing nothing when it could be saving our bills is just wrong. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Condacourt. Any points of clarification? This is a point of clarification to Councillor Condacourt, or is it a point of debate?
I can answer the question.
Okay.
Thank you, Leader. Cleaver Gardens, yes. I fully understand it. We had Mr Condacourt in for a meeting with officers about certain projects that we were going to do in his ward out of courtesy, and he brought up Cleaver Gardens. Yes, myself and the Parks manager had been to Cleaver Gardens and looked. Yes, we haven't cut the grass. The grasses can't be cut because there is a car there that is not movable. We have asked them to move the car, and it is a residence problem. Concerning his complaints, I think from memory, I've had 7 complaints from January till August from Weddington. That is all. And I can clarify that. I have a list of a breakdown of all the wards, because I want to monitor the wards to see where we are breaking down, where we've got to do better. And I have to admit the grass cutting has been better this year. We're a work in progress, and we should get better next year. And I wish to thank Glendale this year for doing it. And we have moved now on to hedge cutting. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Guttridge. And I also know from our discussions that it's not a problem unique to Cleaver Gardens about properties leaving their cars or vans in direct line of the access, which means that we can't physically get in to the properties, to the land to do the cuts. Anyone else wish to come in on the report? No, in which case we'll move to the vote. All those in favour of the report, please show. That is carried. Thank you very much. That moves us on to agenda item number 13, which is the Treasury Annual Report 21-22. Councillor Croftshow.
Thank you, Leader. You'll be very bored of my voice already. Again, this is another backward-looking and technical document for the end of last year. This was how the cash flow and the investment portfolio was managed, not what it was spent on, as we always say. The one point I wanted to raise and just sort of highlight is there's been a bit of chatter and a bit of hoo-ha recently about this term of under-borrowing, and that's a dreadful bit of SIPFA jargonese. What it really means is internal borrowing, which is where we sort of use some of our own balances to borrow. And that's much more prudent for us, or has been for a very long time, because we've effectively been getting nil return on our investment portfolio, but the rate of borrowing has been very high, so they don't net off against each other. So it was much more prudent to borrow internally. There have been some suggestions, I understand, Leader, that we should have borrowed at lower rates in the past. That would not have been practical in any way, shape or form, because the projects that we would have borrowed for had not come on stream yet or had not hit phase yet, and we cannot just borrow just to let it sit in an account. So I can assure you, Leader, and the Cabinet, that we are keeping our capital programme and our borrowing programme and our capital financing requirement under constant review, as you will well know, and we will be taking action on it in the next few months. So I shall move the report.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Croft. Does that receive a seconder? Councillor Guttridge, thank you. There are no public speakers. Any non-Cabinet member? Councillor Condacall.
Thank you, Chair. Unfortunately, there's no paragraph numbers in the appendix, but on page 16, there's a table which said we're under Borough 20 million at the beginning of 2021-22 financial year, and 30 million effectively at the end of the period, March 2022. I'm really concerned by how much of a capital programme we have. We've just heard earlier about the £34 million leisure centre in Bedworth, which will be half funded by government grant and half funded by a borrowing, which then may or may not get partly repaid from Section 106s and other things that come in many years later when housing is developed. So I really want to see a forward-looking report as well as this backward-looking report. The backward-looking report is great to see what happened in the past, but that's almost a year ago now, and the interest rates going forward and the inflation and everything really mean Treasury management is unusually interesting and unusually difficult. And we really, as a council, need to have this going to audit, and hopefully I'm allowed to speak at the audit committee, but also with the meat of what's going to happen this year and next year. And I'm pleased Councillor Croft is talking about a medium-term financial strategy coming out soon, because that has to link in with the Treasury management. But I fear cash flow problems. The other thing that effectively under borrowing does is you actually spend Section 106 monies that come in before you deliver stuff. You effectively temporarily use that money for something and then replace it with some other money, and it's all using your cash flow to fund internally the borrowing. But unfortunately, that also means there's a risk that some of the things we do, like the spending on parks with Section 106, the cycle trails, might eventually need to be delayed if then you've actually lent out the money to effectively pay for your hotel or your swimming pool, and you haven't yet got the 106 in to replace it. So cash flow is important, and it is a very risky thing to do with the current Prime Minister and Chancellor. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Condacall. Any point of clarification? No? Any Cabinet member wish to speak? The only point I would mention is I think, looking at page 17 of the addendum, that having an under-borrowing of 21.3 million at the end of March 2021 was actually probably a sensible thing, because there was a thing called COVID going on, which meant that we couldn't actually crack on with a number of our capital projects. It wouldn't have been prudent to actually borrow or take out any additional liabilities if we weren't actually in a position to literally put the spades in the ground and do the work. A number of things had to cease during COVID, and a number of plans had to change. That was the nature of the virus and pandemic as it was. And I know that Councillor Croft is keeping a very close eye on this with the new 151 officer and giving regular updates to Cabinet, and there will be regular updates coming to Cabinet in future. All those in favour of the report, please show. Okay, that is carried. Thank you very much. We've already done agenda item number 14 earlier, so we'll move on to agenda item 15, which is the Q1 HRA outturn 22-23. Councillor Croft.
Thank you very much, Leader. Again, this is up to August this year, and to contrast the position at the end of last year, on the HRA we have a £540,000 deficit, and I explained the economic situation at the start of the meeting long ago as it feels now. That is largely driven by materials costs, which have grown exponentially this year, and of course the pay awards, because it affects the HRA side of the accounting as well. There are some minor costs. The report talks about increased costs, for example, because the maternity leave has increased. I must plead guilty to that, Leader, because we put it up at the Employment Committee. I think that's something we should be paying for, and Brent may well snigger, but not in that sense. As I say, we should be moving forward with the financial plan at the next Cabinet, if we can get it in, and we will be updating on the future. So we shall move this, Leader.
Thank you, Councillor Croft. Does that receive a seconder? Councillor Smith, thank you. No public speakers, non-Cabinet members. Councillor Condacourt.
Thank you, Chair. Probably the only thing I want to mention is slippages of capital projects, which then obviously knock onto revenue, because obviously we're building hopefully some new council stuff at Bedworth Court. We're building new temporary homeless accommodation. Lots of things are going on. Some of which will generate revenue into the housing account. So it will be useful just to keep a check on that and make sure things have got business plans and how they then work in. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Condacourt. Any points of clarification? No. Any Cabinet member? No. In which case we'll move to the vote. All those in favour of the report, please show. That is carried. Thank you very much. That moves us on to agenda item 16, which is recommendations from OSPs. There are none. And agenda item number 17, there is no any other business. So with that in mind, I will thank everyone for your attendance and forbearance at this marathon session, and I wish you a safe journey home. If we can end the live stream, please.